Thank you everyone for being here. Good morning. Welcome to Systems 101. So for those of you in the crowd, is your head reeling right now with all this systems talk? Like, are you still trying to figure out what is safe systems versus systemic thinking versus systemic safety? What do we do? Why are we saying systems so much? You're going to hear it a lot over this conference. And so what we're hoping with this session, Systems 101, which covers the essentials of safe systems and systems thinking, we're hoping to develop a shared vocabulary together to where we can work together to really understand what we mean by safe systems. How does this apply in the United States? How is it different from what is done in, say, the Netherlands, in Sweden, in Australia? You know, what is it that we are calling safe systems, and how does that tie into Vision Zero? These are all questions that I hope you have, that I hope you're starting to work through as we go through these sessions, and to help you answer them and to work together toward that shared vocabulary, we've invited three wonderful speakers here this morning who are each going to address one of those three different questions or different aspects of it. So first up, we have Dr. Peter Firth, who is a professor of civil and environmental engineering at Northeastern University. Dr. Firth has a PhD in transportation systems from MIT and has been researching traffic control, transportation safety, and the intersection between these elements and mode choices for almost 40 years. I think I've got that right, about 40 years. And so he regularly teaches abroad in the Netherlands, and he has published in the Transportation Research Record, Transportation Research Part C, and many, many more. He is currently involved in our road course that we are developing right now for bicycle safety. He just is a friend of the HSRC and really an expert in safety for all different road users. And so we've invited him here today because he is an expert in safe systems and because of his experience in the Netherlands. So with that, welcome Dr. Peter Firth.
Thank you, Wes. Without question, the best part of my job as a professor at Northeastern is that I get to lead a study abroad class. And every summer, for the last 10 summers, I've been taking my 25 favorite students over to Holland. We aren't there for 2 weeks, 1 week or 2 weeks. We're there for 5 weeks. And for 5 weeks, my students are living on bicycles, living on trains, walking. And because I'm leading a class of students, all these doors open to us. I can go to the research institutes and cities and towns and say, hey, could you give us a talk about what you're doing to make things safer? And so I've gotten a chance to talk with some of the leading people in the Dutch safety program. And what I also really appreciate is not only have I gotten to talk to the people at the top who have written the documents and so on, but I've gotten to talk to people down the line, down to the engineers who are doing design, and I've seen how it's impacted them, how they've interpreted, how the city officials are putting it on their streets and so on. And so what I'm bringing you today is I want to answer the question, what is the systematic safety approach as it's been applied in Holland? And as an American, I look at it, what could it mean for us? In Sweden, I think most people know they started a systematic safety program that they call Vision Zero. The same year, 1996, the Dutch also started a family with the same kind of activities. They gave it a different name, sustainable safety. The Swedish name is cooler, it kind of took off. But they're based on the same approach of a systematic safety approach to our safe systems approach to making roads safer. So I like the principles behind Europe's Vision Zero, and I just want to give a disclaimer. What I'm telling you is not 100% pure what the Dutch documents say, because I've even found in Dutch practice is a little bit different from what the Dutch documents say. And then one other thing where there's a difference between me and what the Dutch documents say is often the Dutch documents say nothing about certain topics because to them it's like just so obvious. They don't address in their documents stuff that they've been doing right for the last 60 years, but we aren't doing it. So I've added some of those things because they certainly apply. So I always like to start with a slide like this. People tend to think that, oh, you just can't bring in examples from Europe because Europeans are different, they're made of cheese or something like that. So if we go back to 1972, they had the same traffic fatality rate that we did. Since then, we got a lot better. But they got so much better that if we had improved at the same rate that they had, we'd be saving more than 20,000 lives a year. So we have something to learn. What can we learn from them? And I'm an engineer, so I have a bias, maybe. But in a nutshell, I'm going to tell you what the difference is. Safe systems applies in many different things, but infrastructure is one of them, and it's a really big one. And that's where they've put their emphasis. You put if you say we're going to make the vehicle safer, oh, that's really important, but that's happened across the world. So the benefits we got from safer vehicles, they also got. They put a lot of emphasis in infrastructure, and I'm going to be talking about that. One more important thing I want to say, this is kind of on the side, but I do a lot of work with bicycles and pedestrians. And when it comes to bicycles and pedestrians, and children especially, safety cannot be measured only by the number of injuries and deaths. Safety is measured by extinction. Kids just stop walking to school. People stop riding a bike. So we will not have solved the safety problem only by having fewer injuries and deaths. We have to look at, are people actually out there riding bikes and walking? All right, so from the Dutch approach, I want to share with you 3 values, 3 properties of humans, and 5 principles. So the first value, and this is for all of the European systematic safety approaches, is that safe mobility is a civil right. People, in order to live their lives in this modern day and age, you just can't, it's not enough to say, well, we need food and water and shelter. Yes, you need those things. You also need to be able to get around. That's just life. And people should be able to get to work, to get to a friend's house, to get to wherever they're going safely. That is a civil right. Now, the way I want to emphasize this is compare it with something that we have come to know as a civil right through the Americans with Disabilities Act. That law and the regulations that have followed it require that where there's a bus stop, citizens who have to get around with wheelchairs or other mobility devices need to be able to get out of the bus safely. And to do that, you need an 8-foot deep sidewalk so you can have room for the ramp, and then we can roll off the ramp onto the sidewalk. And so in this, at this bus stop, because that's a civil right, the jurisdiction expanded the sidewalk area so that a person in a wheelchair can get off the bus. And then how are they supposed to cross the street? That is not yet considered a civil right. Everybody should know that at a bus stop, half the passengers are crossing the street. You know, if you don't have to cross the street to get on the bus, when you come home, you have to cross the street when you get off the bus. Everybody crosses the street at a bus stop. That's a difference. We have not accepted that yet as a civil right. Laura earlier already showed you this location in Georgia where the mother was crossing the street with her child. The child was confused because some people ahead of them started crossing, and he just broke free of his mother's hand to run across and got killed. A great tragedy. And the second value is that the road system owner is responsible. When a tragedy like that happens, we start asking, why, who's to blame? So first of all, of course, we look at the driver. Was the driver impaired? And sure, the driver was bad. But, I mean, to anybody, it's just, to me, it just seems obvious. Certainly to planners, they'd look and they'd say, well, there's no safe crossing. You build a public housing complex where you know a lot of people who don't own cars are going to be living. On a highway, there's a bus stop. That's how they travel. They get around by bus. You've got to provide a safe crossing at intersections. But what did the county do? The county, who owns this road? The day after that tragedy happened, they went and they served the woman with, you were responsible. You were doing an unsafe thing, crossing the street with your child. Don't you know? Parents are supposed to protect their children. They shouldn't be crossing busy streets with them. Why did they do this? To take the blame away from themselves. Eventually, the solution they came up was they moved the housing complex to where there was a safer crossing. No, they didn't. Can't do that. They just removed the bus stop and said, okay, everybody, now you can walk a third of a mile to the closest bus stop where at least there is a safe crossing. So in Europe, in Holland, the road owner accepts responsibility. It's my responsibility to provide a safe crossing, and you just have to do it at every bus stop. And there are other aspects like this. One thing they like to say is, if this were any other business, if somebody died at a construction site because they fell off the roof, and you say, oh, well, that worker wasn't supposed to go near the edge of the roof, and you see that worker was supposed to put up the wall, so that's whose fault it was. That would never fly. Your construction site would be shut down the next day. Your factory would be shut down the next day. And the Dutch like to say this, if our road system were like any other industry, it would be shut down immediately because it's not following standard safety principles. And the third thing is, of course, that traffic safety programs have to go beyond black spot treatments, go beyond looking for, oh, at this location there were 5 crashes, and identify systematic safety risks and then fix them. So at this location in Boston, this is a crosswalk across a 4-lane road. A pedestrian was killed. I'm glad to say that people are paying a little more attention to when bad things like that happen. And so they treated this crosswalk, what you see there with the yellow lines creating a little island and a sign there. That was the treatment. That was what was added to make it safer. But there are 20 crossings identical to it along that street. So after a year and a half, a pedestrian was killed at another one of them. So what, are we going to have to wait until the pedestrian gets killed at every one of these crosswalks and then we'll treat it? No. When the second one happened, okay, now then they went and they treated all of them. But what about the next street where there's a 4-lane crossing? And yeah, I was at a public meeting only a few months ago where all this grief was being poured out because of a woman who was killed crossing the street, a 4-lane unsignalized crossing. It is an easily identifiable safety hazard, and the road owner should fix it. So what systematic safety has meant in the Netherlands is large-scale systemic interventions, saying we need to fix something throughout our road system. One was 30-kilometer-an-hour zones. Citizens have a right to live on a nice, quiet street. We know they all want to do that. If you're rich, you buy a house on a cul-de-sac. Well, why can't everybody have what they have, living on a nice, quiet street? And so the government gave a subsidy to local communities who wanted to do that. They all wanted to do that, and within like 10 years, 75% of the road miles, urban road miles at least, have become traffic calmed. And you can't just put up a sign, 30 kilometers an hour. You have to actually put in speed humps and other kinds of traffic calming devices. Roundabouts. Once it got to be known that they were the safest kind of intersection, they became the default intersection now. If you're learning engineering, you learn. If there's an intersection that first thing to do, put in a roundabout. If you can't do that, okay, you try something else. And side street crossing tables, like I mentioned, like you see in the picture there. So Sweden has had them since the 1990s. They came to Holland in the 2000s or something, and as soon as people saw, what, you can do that? This is a 20% ramp, 20% grade. Just slows everybody down as they're turning onto and off of the side street as they go across the bike path and the sidewalk, and then they come back down at the other end. So that means every car crossing the sidewalk is going over at about 5 miles an hour, a speed at which you really can stop on a dime, and that just cut the crash rate with bikes in half. Just shoo. So why do traffic injuries happen? They have a theory. And I want to say, while we all believe in data-driven approaches, data is really important, what I find is lacking in when I've heard Americans talk about safety programs is the lack of a theory. Yes, we need data, but it can't just be some black box that I don't know why, but for some reason, when you do this intervention, you get this thing and this thing. Let's understand, why do crashes happen? So the Dutch approach thinks about this a lot. And it comes down to 3 properties of humans. The first one, that humans are vulnerable. This one is pretty well understood, very well understood. So if you hit a human at a high speed with a high mass vehicle, they're in trouble. The second is that humans make mistakes. Some intentionally, and many unintentionally, but some even intentionally. And so we have to think about, how can we lower the risk of error? And a big aspect of that is understanding cognitive processes. There are some things that are just automatic. In the driving world, things like keeping your lane, knowing which foot, where to press your foot when you want to go faster versus when you want to go slower. We don't think about, now let's see, which foot do I use? It just comes automatically, and things like that have a very, very low error rate. But when you have to think about, now which lane am I supposed to be in for the turn coming up, and what am I supposed to do now, it becomes easier to make a mistake. When you're crossing the street, if you're crossing one lane, that takes you about 4 seconds to get from the sidewalk to a crossing island. 4 seconds. Humans are pretty good at predicting what's going to happen 4 seconds from now. But if you're crossing a 4-lane road and traffic is going 40 miles an hour, you've got to be able to identify a vehicle more than 1,000 feet away, figure out what speed it's going. This is not an ability that humans have. Predict how soon it's going to get here and decide whether it's safe to cross. A lot more mistakes will happen when you make it complicated. And then a third principle, you won't find this in the Dutch writings, but it's implied in their writings. Humans are inherently impatient, and we're not going to take this out of humans. This is especially important for bikes. People in cars want to pass people on bikes. I'm sorry, they just won't stay behind you. All of you bike riders know this very well. And so, if we want to have good safety, we have to provide safe ways for cars to pass bikes. So these 3 properties lead to the 5 principles. And I've reordered them and given them more understandable names. But so the most important principles: speed, control, and separation. I think everybody understands, yes, as I said, we need to control speeds. And then if the speed is too high for a certain use, we'll then separate, put the pedestrians on a sidewalk and put the bikes in a protected bike lane. And the researchers proposed, and the nation has accepted, there are standard speeds for every critical vulnerability. So one critical vulnerability is people crossing the street anywhere. That's what happens on local streets. You drive to a friend's house, you park your car on one side of the street, their house is on the other side, you just cross. Nobody goes to a crosswalk. They just cross everywhere. So on a street like that, or a street where people are riding their bikes in mixed traffic, again on local streets, the maximum safe speed, 30 kilometers an hour or 20 miles an hour. Where people are crossing, not anywhere, but at crosswalks, unsignalized crosswalks. There, the maximum safe speed is 25 miles an hour or 40 kilometers an hour. This, again, is something you won't find in the standard Dutch publications, but in several Dutch cities, this is what they've come up with, because you can't turn every street into a 20-mile-an-hour street. But it's safe when people cross at 25 miles an hour. We did some research at Northeastern into will drivers stop as they're supposed to? And that's the law. Will they yield to a pedestrian who's waiting to cross? And the answer is, at 25 miles an hour, yes, they will. At 30 miles an hour, no, they won't. It's that simple. And then where cars might collide at a right angle, 30 miles an hour, 50 kilometers an hour. And so then the task goes to the engineers. How do you design roads to get people to go 20 miles an hour in this context, 25 on this kind of road, 30 at intersections on those other kinds of roads? So for speed control, as I've seen what I've learned in Holland, I bring it back to the American context, I think, what do we need? Number one is road diets. Multi-lane roads are inherently dangerous. Because on a multi-lane road, you can pass. And if you can pass, you can speed. Period. I hear a lot about, oh, we can calm traffic by making lanes narrower. Hey, I'm all in favor of making lanes narrower. But if you have a multi-lane road, you are not going to slow traffic down just by making lanes narrower. I mean, maybe the average might go down half a mile an hour or something like that. But when somebody wants to go 40 or 50 miles an hour, if they've got 2 lanes and traffic is light, they are going to be going 40 or 50 miles an hour. The main way to control speeding on multi-lane roads is make it so that it's not multi-lane. I finally see my timer over there. So the second biggest thing is crossing islands. I don't know why, but the American guidelines about crossing islands say they might be a good idea on multi-lane roads. Might be. Multi-lane in Holland and all of Europe. It's just expected on 2-lane roads, everywhere. And when you think about the benefits, how much easier it is to cross, how much safer it is to cross, how they slow cars down, we should be putting crossing islands everywhere. Separation, of course, there are guidelines for when to separate bikes. So here are the 5 principles: speed control and separation, because humans are vulnerable. Then there are 2 others: simplicity, visibility, and predictability, and forgivingness and restrictiveness, because humans make mistakes. How to make a system so that when you make a mistake, it doesn't result in a serious injury or death, and how to prevent people from making intentional mistakes. A 4th principle, functional harmony. There's one function, road function, which is carrying through traffic, that is best met with high speed. All the other functions need low speed. You don't want to have a road try to meet incompatible functions. And then the last principle, state awareness, has to do with inexperienced drivers, drunken drivers, and that kind of thing. So I'll leave you with this list of large-scale systemic interventions that when I study the Dutch principles, this is what we should be doing in the US. The first 4 is stuff that they've been doing in Holland for 60 years. It's just routine. And the last 3 are things that they've been doing, but they're doing all of them. And thank you for your attention.
So thank you so much, Dr. Firth. Next up, we have Dr. Kristen Hassmiller-Litch. Dr. Hassmiller-Litch is an associate professor in the Department of Health Policy and Management at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Her research and practice-based work seek to advance the way we use system maps and local data to improve policy decision-making at multiple levels within systems and to engage stakeholders in the process. She regularly teaches guest lectures on systems applications and has worked with the CSCRS to host a number of systems-based workshops uncovering mental models and systems dynamics behind the rising tide of pedestrian fatalities. And we think that her talk is going to complement Dr. Firth's quite well. So please welcome Dr. Hassmiller-Litch.
All right, it's really exciting to be here today. Don't do that. Okay, so before I get started, I just want you to think for a second about how you spend your time in the last day, in the last week. How much of your time is spent putting out fires, dealing with problems? Right? In your work, at home? How many of you would say that you spend at least 25% of your time dealing with problems, issues that arise? Hands up. Okay, really high. How many of us spend at least 50% of our time dealing with problems? Putting out fires. Yeah, a lot of us. Okay. 75%? Right. Okay. Yeah, I'm probably at least 75%. It's how we're wired. We're hardwired as humans to see a problem, to get it tackled. And that works a lot of the time. Think about those times when you don't, though. Think about how are we spending our time when we're not just reacting to problems, but really trying to figure stuff out. So I want you to keep in mind, as I give this talk, keep in mind an example of where you dug a little bit deeper to try to understand the problem, where you invest in that, why you invest in that, how you invest in that. Okay? Systems thinking, systems science, I want to start to introduce some vocabulary and some tools that are really popping up very naturally, organically in the conversations that we're having this morning. But let's level set and get some language out there. When we invest in systems thinking, systems science, it needs to start out with a problem or an opportunity for improvement. We want to bend the curve or a set of curves if there's interrelated outcomes that we care about. So let's take one example. There's a much more detailed presentation on this work by Becky Nauman later on today, but let's take one example of a problem, a curve we might want to bend. Pedestrian fatalities, both the numbers and rates, they were going down for a long time, but then started to come back up. So the question is why? So if we turn and ask a number of experts, all of you in the room, if we understand why, what's underneath this curve, what is it that, if we want to see this as a problem and find a solution, firefight to put it out, what do we need to do? A lot of you will have an idea of what we need to do. The problem is, you point to lots of different things. Because this is a hard problem. There's a lot of different reasons why that trend might be occurring. So these are a number of the reasons that we've heard from a group of 40 stakeholders that we brought together to talk about that problematic trend. So when we face a big problem, a big fire, an event, we tend to want to fix it. Systems thinking, one of the core sort of principles of systems thinking is to not just always react to those events, but to get underneath the waterline and study the iceberg. So I'm going to talk about this iceberg as a framework for thinking about how you can do systems thinking. So the first level under the water is that we don't want to always just react to events, especially if these events, these problems are persistent, they keep happening. We want to look at patterns, and you heard some wonderful examples of looking at patterns from Alan and Anne's talk. Okay? Even I loved when one of you asked Anne to flip back to the slide and start calling out, explaining why. Why do we see the trends happening? We want to put these events into a bigger picture context. What's happening over time? What's happening across different subpopulations in different regions of the country? Okay? And we want to explain why. It's often a lot of the reason for these events that, they're complex. So we need to start to look at patterns, which we often do, but we need to go even further below the waterline and understand what is the system, what is the systemic structure that is creating those problematic or undesirable trends that we want to fix. So what do I mean by system? Often when I ask people what do I mean by system, what I hear is, well, something you can draw an org chart for. The federal government is a system, or maybe the information systems are a system. Road safety, you all think about systems in a lot of other ways. What I mean when I say system is what are all of those interconnected factors, structures, forces, decisions? What are all of the things that come together that produce the trends that we want to change? What is the structure of the system that is producing the trends that we want to change? Often I'll hear people say, oh, the problem is that the system is broken. Actually, the system is designed to produce exactly what we're seeing. We need to understand what about the system is producing those outcomes. That gives us a better understanding of how to go in there and fix these problems. So when I talk about system, it's trying to understand the structure. That is, what is it that's coming together to underpin those patterns over time? Okay? This can be hard. We don't always need to invest in really thinking through this carefully or bringing in tools to help us do this, but sometimes we do. When? Well, when we have a lot of detail complexity, a lot of parts. Okay? True of cars, true of people, a lot of parts. But another thing that makes us really need to bring tools in to help with systems thinking is when we have dynamic complexity. What is this? Dynamic complexity means that we've got one or more of these characteristics. The first one being what Anne nicely called this crazy web of factors that come together to shape the outcomes that we care about. all these pieces, they interact, interconnect, and really in ways that make it hard for us to know what's going on, or to think about how our solutions are going to ripple through the system to make things better, or maybe be undermined by our reaction to the changes. Another aspect of dynamic complexity is that we have feedback loops. So something changes, and then those changes ripple through the system to drive more change. Okay? These are powerful because they're not just a change and then one effect. They keep going. They drive more change. We often talk about these naturally as vicious cycles, virtuous cycles. And they either drive more and more change, that's a reinforcing or a positive feedback loop, or they can counteract change, a balancing loop or a negative feedback loop. Counteracting change is there's a problem, and that triggers a response to it often, and we try to bring control to that problem. Okay? Sometimes these loops are good, sometimes they're bad, it just depends. But these loops are powerful, and they can be hard to intuit. And then the other part is nonlinear relationships, and we've got plenty of these in road safety. So one example being there's a nonlinear relationship between the speed the car's going when there's a crash with a person, a pedestrian, and what happens, the likelihood of survival. Nonlinear relationships. You put these together, and it's really hard to keep straight what's underneath that iceberg. How are we getting these trends that we're getting, and what is it going to take? What are the combination of things that we need to do to really address this problem? So, and I talked about feedback loops. Here's an example of a feedback loop. So start about 2 o'clock, and you're going to start to see a tool that we use to tell these stories so that we can get more explicit about our understanding of the dynamics. Explicitly understanding them is a great way to test them, talking about them together with other people, testing them against data. But so here, causal loop diagram, the way we read this is, let's start anywhere, but let's just say that there's more pedestrians on the road. With more pedestrians on the road, there's more pedestrians visible on the road. What happens? Drivers perceive the need, they see them, they perceive the need to be a little more attentive, they're more attentive, crashes go down, crash deaths go down, and it feels safer to walk. So here's a feedback loop, a reinforcing feedback loop that if it's triggered and it's going in the right way, can help people feel safer to walk. Safety in numbers. If it's triggered the wrong way, what's going to happen? Fewer people walking. Drivers start to get used to not needing to be very attentive. Right? So things can go wrong. People come out there, there's going to be a crash. Now, what gets tricky is let's combine these things together. This interconnected web of factors, there's multiple feedback loops. So here's another example of a feedback loop that's nested with that same one. Eventually, though, something else that we need to face is that the more pedestrians on the road, there's more people to potentially hit. So which one of these loops is going to dominate? And how do we make sure that we really trigger that outer loop, trigger attentiveness? Another part of what makes systems hard to understand is that the structure of the system, it's not just the things we build, it's the things that we think. It's how we're trained in our disciplines. It's what we know, it's what we see in the data, what we don't see. It's our incentives, the policies around us, the biases that we have, our simplifying heuristics. What I often talk about is our mental models. We are important parts of the system. And we all have all of these things that shape how we put out fires, how we react, and we are contributing to system structure. So a big part of systems thinking is trying to uncover how we contribute to the problem or to potentially to the solution, and trying to bring people together, us together, to really develop this shared understanding of the system. So there are a number of methods to help us do this, and that's what system science, systems thinking tools are all about. Some of them are qualitative. They just help us have different conversations and keep track of what we're talking about and how it's complex. Others are more quantitative. We can start to build simulation models to test these theories in the form of diagrams, qualitative diagrams. So there's a number of different approaches to doing this. But really what it's all about is trying to get us in the habit of not just seeing the details. We need to see the details. A lot of the work that we do to reduce problems and study the parts is important. But to remember to step back to the forest level and see the big picture, see how things interconnect. Know where we need to dig in next, but then zoom back into the level of the trees. It's this systematic, structured inquiry that gets us to see detail, but then also to put that in the context of the bigger patterns. So here's a great quote by Peter Senge about what systems systems thinking, system science is all about. It's really about seeing wholes, trying to study wholes, and then using that as the foundation for designing better actions, better solutions. I often talk about single loop and double loop learning. So single loop learning is what we often do. So start down kind of at the bottom around 7 o'clock. We have decisions, strategy. We think we understand how things work, our mental models. Around 3 o'clock, we've got information, data. We put those together and we make decisions about how we're going to change the world, what we're going to put in place to drive improvement in the world. And then what we do with single loop learning is after we intervene in the real world, we look at the data. Did what we expected to happen happen? Okay. If yes, then what do? More of the same. It worked, let's keep going. If it didn't work, no. And what we need to do with double loop learning that we don't always do and we don't always have methods to help us do is that we need to make sure that we take the time when we get this data about what worked to really update our understanding of why it worked, our understanding of the systems. Okay? We need to document that, talk about it, and then use that to make better decisions moving forward.
Kristen, I think that's a good stop.
Okay, all right. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. There are a number of resources in the slides that you should take a look at. If you want more information, let me turn it back over.
Thank you. Okay, last we have Ms. Leah Shaham. Ms. Shaham is the founder and director of the Vision Zero Network, a national campaign supporting cities working toward Vision Zero, zero traffic fatalities and severe injuries. She also serves on the advisory board of the Collaborative Sciences Center for Road Safety. As a German Marshall Fund Fellow, Ms. Shaham researched Vision Zero strategies in Sweden, Germany, and the Netherlands. Prior to that, she was the executive director of the 10,000-member San Francisco Bicycle Coalition, which promotes bicycling for everyday transportation. Ms. Shaham formerly served on the board of directors of the Golden Gate Bridge, Highway and Transportation District, and the San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency. Please welcome.
Thank you, Wes. All right, show of hands. Who wants to help me take Peter and Kristen on a road show? Because honestly, is that it really? Come on. This is what we need to be talking about across the country, and I'm sure lots of other things today. But I just want to say thank you to the Collaborative for bringing us together. This is a huge missing piece. We need to be doing this. We're doing it. We need to be doing it faster. Okay, thanks for having me. So I don't need to give you the terrible statistics, but I feel like I at least need to just throw it out there to remind us. Why are we here? 40,000 preventable deaths a year on our roads, sidewalks, bike lanes. We know that, right? Millions more injuries. It's a public health crisis of epic proportions. We all know that, right? We desperately need the safe systems work, I believe, to make that change. Okay, there's my downside of things. Positive side of things. People are not waiting for us to fix the problem. I still think we need to, and let's hurry it up. But people are taking to the streets right now. Give credit to New York City for being first, San Francisco, Washington, D.C., Chicago, Durham, Fort Lauderdale, Austin, San Antonio, San Diego. Regular people are taking to the streets and saying enough is enough. They are not waiting for us to fix it. These are people who've been injured in traffic crashes. These are people who've lost loved ones in traffic crashes. These are people forming groups like Families for Safe Streets saying enough is enough. And they are the ones, I would say, making the greatest change on our streets right now. They are the ones helping this happen. I hope you can see there's more than 40 dots on this map. So more than 40 communities, mostly local, a few county or regional level, where they have made the commitment of zero traffic deaths or severe injuries in a set time frame. 2 of them have not set a set time frame. I will not name them, but if you want to come ask me later, I will tell you who they are, and you can bug them. So this is pretty significant. This has been since 2014. If we'd shown you this map in 2013, there would have been 0. So since 2014, you've got at least 40 mayors, police chiefs, local transportation directors who are willing to stand up in a public way and write it down and say it on TV and all that. My goal is 0 traffic deaths and severe injuries. Were we saying that? Was anybody saying that? I mean, besides the believers, us in the room, were elected officials saying that 5 years ago? In this country. You know, in other countries, yes. God love them. But in our country, no. So real quickly, as a moment, I think I should say, our work, the Vision Zero Network, we're a nonprofit. We're trying to help all these folks. Anyone that's serious about Vision Zero, we want to help you do it. So I won't go over this. Peter did a great job of really getting to the crux of this, and Kristen as well. This is on our website, check it out. If there's a really basic graph you want to show somebody, I would recommend this one. I think we're in a really, this is great, we made it, it's awesome, we built on the Swedes and the Dutch and da-da-da, but we're in a real dangerous place right now where people are grabbing onto the Vision Zero logo or slogan or title without understanding this, and I'm not going to read it, but not understanding. There is a difference between the traditional approach to traffic safety, and no offense, I used to do it that way too. We're doing it a new way with Vision Zero. People need to understand this. So if your community is thinking about Vision Zero, doing Vision Zero, please make sure they understand this. It's really important. And part of it is this approach, the spectrum of prevention, and credit to the Prevention Institute for creating this. Real briefly, thinking about where we're focusing our energy. This is used for all sorts of issues. This isn't a traffic safety thing. This is public health stuff. Thank you, public health people, for teaching us this or trying to teach us this. Traditionally, we've spent a bunch of time at the bottom. Bottom isn't bad here, but we've spent a bunch of time in this providing community education, knowledge, and skills. We've been telling people, hey, drive safer. Hey, walk safer. Hey, individual, you can be better and do better. And by the way, a lot of room for that still. I'm not saying do not educate. Please keep educating. But we spent very little time, historically, traditionally, up at the top realms, influencing policy, legislation, road design. And I don't mean nothing, but our greatest energy has not been at the top here. So let me just pause and say this education word. It's a real buzzword, general word, right? What I say for education, you say for education, everybody means something different when they say education. I would encourage us to start taking that word education and think not just about educating all the individuals on the road and what they do individually. Educate up. Spend way more time educating your policymakers, your electeds, your system designers in this room right now, your influencers, that's media. Those people you will reach and that will shower down versus spending all our time with billboard ads, and radio PSAs. It's not really working. The other thing I will challenge folks to do is think beyond our traditional E's. And I don't want to offend anybody in the room. There is room for all the E's. And on top of the traditional ones, of course, we want to add engagement and equity. Those are the new E's. There's room, and new, but maybe newly talked about. We need all the E's. But those E's have really, they've siloed us in many ways. And we need to unsilo ourselves. So we're really thinking a lot about how do we, and Vision Zero is one way to do it, there's a bunch of other ways to do it, but how do we move out of those silos and think about all these pieces together? And I just want to give some real quick examples where we're seeing this happen at the local level. And let me acknowledge, I know it's easier at the local level, say than the state level or the federal level, but I hope the state and federal people in the room are also looking at the local folks who are doing this as great examples. So Los Angeles, big, messy city, problems, challenges. But one of the things they're doing through their Vision Zero work is now cross-collaborating on their budgets. So the LA DOT doesn't put in a budget separate from the police, separate from public works, separate from public health around traffic safety work. They collaborated on the front end and put in a joint budget request amongst those agencies and ended up getting more money than those individual agencies got before. More importantly, they now have a shared set of expectations for what they're doing with that money. That's a micro example, but a really important one, right? Similarly, I'll share San Francisco, where I live. Leading our local Vision Zero work is not just our Department of Transportation. It's co-led by our local public health department and our transportation department. Our transportation department locally funds an epidemiologist in the public health department purely to do traffic safety Vision Zero work. They're in the public health department. Not a huge deal, but it's making a difference in how they work. I'm moving really quickly, but everybody knows about the data-driven. We've talked about the data-driven. It's shocking to me, but it's true. We really haven't, our communities, the communities we're working with weren't developing and using something called a high injury network, or whatever you want to call it. They didn't really have that level of detail, understanding where the problems were and focusing their limited dollars. Raise your hand if your community has too much money. Raise your hand if your community's ever going to have enough money, right? Okay, so you've got to make choices, right? So this data obviously helps us make choices. But I want to build on something Peter said, and this is step one. We kind of have to start with a black dot approach, right? What are the problems we've seen in the last 5 years, 10 years? Let's get out there. But we've got to quickly then transition to being proactive, predictive, systems-based. And I'll just throw out a great example. Please look if you haven't seen it. New York City DOT is doing great work on a left turn. I won't describe it here well, but basically multi-lane left turns. Surprise, problematic, lots of collisions and crashes and injuries. And they're now, instead of just going back and fixing the, 30 that have been problematic with injuries, they're systematically fixing them all because they see a pattern that if it has not been a problem, it probably will be. So check it out. We know what works, generally. I mean, not 100%. Right? And people way smarter in this room know way more than I do. But we know what works, the speed management piece, right? Everybody's seen this version, or some version, I should say, of this graph. We all know the stats. This matters a lot, right? If we brought speeds down, I'm thinking particularly around cities, communities where you know people are walking and biking, right? Physically vulnerable, and then you've got motorists. The most important thing you can do is manage speed. Then why, state DOT reps in this room, no offense, but why are you not letting cities manage their speed appropriately? And a bunch of you aren't. A bunch of state DOTs are not doing that. So we know what works, and we're not doing it. Why, federal government, are we not funding speed management as one of the top priorities, NHTSA? And I know this can change, so this is not a call out, it's more like a call forward. How can we do that? Because we know to manage speed, we can do these things. We can redesign, we need to redesign streets. We need to set safe speed limits. That usually means lowering speed limits. And we need to use technology that works carefully, smartly, equitably, things like automated speed enforcement. And I want to give some kudos to New York City. And I know my friends from New York City will say, don't give them too much kudos because they're not doing everything right. And they are not doing everything right. But they are doing some things right. I call out New York City because I know it's a hard city to relate to for most of us who are not from a big city. But being the first US city to adopt Vision Zero, I think they're learning a lot. I think they're teaching us a lot. And let me just pause and say, if you don't already know it, in the 5 years since they've been working on Vision Zero, they've cut traffic deaths by a third. Who else in here can say that? And I know it's not, again, not perfect, they're not doing everything right, but when you ask New York City leaders, professionals, and the folks really on the ground, when you say, what's the most important thing? What are the things that have really made that, how are you saving those lives? What they will tell you is it's mainly about managing speed. It's by redesigning streets, big, massive, messy, dangerous streets, so calming the streets. They're dangerous by design and they're changing the streets. They've lowered speed limits citywide, and they're using automated speed enforcement, not without a vicious fight at their state legislature, who mostly fought them every step of the way. But I say this because it works and they're doing it, but it's largely about managing speed and redesigning streets. Let me pause on one thing, funding. Everybody says, oh, well, how do you get money for Vision Zero? And I'm gonna do a program when I get money for Vision Zero. And I'll just say, don't wait for the money. You have the money. Reallocate your money. And I'm seeing my time, so I'm gonna go super fast and just show you one more slide because I have to, because I wouldn't be, check out our core elements online. I just have to do this. Our communities have not been designed equally or equitably. I hope you can read these. Let me just sum it up. Communities of color, low-income communities, seniors, children are far more they're disproportionately impacted by the poor roadways we've built and by the poor policies we've designed. So we need to come back and work on that. We need to infuse equity in the work we're doing. And I will pause just to say, there's a lot of sadness around, oh, we're trying to stop these terrible things, we're trying to stop suffering, right? Our goal is zero. Actually, our goal is more. Our goal is more birthdays, more anniversaries, more celebrations, more time with loved ones, I'm going to give credit, this is the Los Angeles Vision Zero Alliance that created this. Bring back this infusion, I would say, of hope and joy to our work, right? Yes, it's about preventing the awful stuff, but it's really about more and about the positive that you're all doing in this room. So I want to say thank you for all of you every day and the important work you're doing. Oh, and let me just say one more thing. We would love to talk more about Vision Zero. I knew I didn't have enough time, so my counterpart Veronica and I are going to be taking advantage of the little afternoon break. We'll be in the Marriott Hotel lobby, which is connected to this thing we're in. Marriott Hotel lobby from 4:15 to 5. If you want to talk Vision Zero with us, come find us. Thanks.
To quickly address that, I asked each of my three panelists to condense eons of work and things that we could spend days here talking about into very brief presentations. So thank you all so much for being adaptable, flexible, and covering as much as you did. So are there any questions in the crowd before we move on to our break? I think there are a couple room microphones wandering around. I have one up here and one over here. I was also about to give a pop quiz of what's the difference between safe systems and systemic safety, but looks like we have some questions, so go ahead.
Hi, I'm Louis Merlin of Florida Atlantic University. Thank you all for your presentations. I enjoyed all the presentations. I agree with all the presentations. Where I live in Florida, the dominant roadway design is a 6-lane arterial road. So, I can imagine us going down to 4 lanes, maybe. I can't imagine all of our high volume roadways going down to 2 lanes. So my question is, I guess this is mostly to Dr. North, but what is a safe 4-lane, high volume, high capacity roadway look like?
Well, you can.
I can do it from right here. So we have a principle of speed control and separation. So the first thing is you need to separate vulnerable users from these high mass vehicles. So having a separate place for people to walk and ride a bike. And just as importantly, a safe crossing. So yes, we need to have some roads that are widened because they carry a lot of traffic. But every place that people normally want to cross, or if you've got apartments on one side and you've got shops on the other, people want to cross wherever you've got a bus stop. And we know ways to make safe crossings. Yes, we can put in traffic signals and hawk signals. And then in urban areas where there are, or areas where there are a lot more crossings, I've developed a way to help limit speeding opportunities using traffic signals, where your traffic signals are pretty frequent. The dominant way of timing traffic lights is looking for coordination to help the through traffic get through, and it's not thinking a bit about what it does for safety. The dominant Dutch way of programming traffic lights, they think about throughput, but coordination is not so important. Safety is more important, and that means preferring actuated control to coordinated control. It means preferring short cycles, because the most dangerous thing is when you've got a long green, and with long cycles you get these long greens, the traffic is all gone, somebody's driving along and they see ahead of them a stale green light. It's been green for a while. You know it's not going to stay green forever. And so what do? You want to speed. And then meanwhile, somebody wants to cross the street. The light is red, it's been red forever. And I see nobody coming. I think this is a good time for me to cross, or a side street person to make a left turn or something like that. So those are some ideas about how to tame our multi-lane road.
Other questions? Over here. Michael?
Hi, Michael Schwartz with Ride Report. Thank you, all three of you. Those were excellent presentations. And I find when I see presentations like this, you see rooms, sure, we're all, you're preaching to the choir here, but I think pretty much everybody nods their heads. You get very few people who disagree with your findings or your conclusions. So my question to those of you, for really all three of you, where is the breakdown of translating sort of this head nodding into the sort of action on the ground? What are the sort of diagnoses of where cities or advocacy groups or politicians? Where's the issue? And also, perhaps to Peter, internationally, how were the Dutch able to overcome that hurdle and really make this part of a systemic practice? What can we learn from them?
Either of you want to try answering the first part?
I will only get to a piece of it. Great question, Michael. One of the graphs, little things I didn't show, I want to give credit to the Road to Zero national effort, which for the first time is saying, hey, at a national level, we should have the goal of zero traffic deaths, right? And within that, one of the tenets, so to speak, is like a safe systems approach. There's a great report about it. We're thinking about it. That needs to be infused in federal funding and in federal policy making. Obviously, this is not the quick tomorrow answer, right? But how do we who influence federal policy do that? How do we who influence state policy do that? It's easier, and it's starting to happen at the local level. We are seeing more systemic approaches at the local level. So, does that rain up, or filter up? That's not an easy answer, but I think we have to figure out how do we do that. And I think people in this room need to think, you said it in the beginning, Laura, how do we connect research with practice? That is a huge missing piece. We're not doing it great right now. And one other piece that, thank you, because I didn't get to say this, is we need to fund strong advocacy way more than we are. Those pictures, a couple pictures I showed, so much of what is sprouting is individual advocacy groups like Transportation Alternatives in New York City or Walk San Francisco or Bike Durham, who are doing the hard work of showing up and saying what your transportation professionals want to say often and want to do, but can't for political reasons, let's be honest. So find ways to support that advocacy. Find ways to fund groups like Families for Safe Streets. If you haven't heard of them, please go check that out. There's about 7 or 8 chapters now. These are folks who've lost loved ones and are coming together and voicing their needs, just like MAD. We all know MAD, right? And what a shift MAD's advocacy has made in how we approach drunk driving and the policy change. We need to support these groups. We can't do it as a bunch of, frankly, professionals sitting in a room together.
For a short answer, I think we have a little bit of time if you want to.
I'll go very quick with the systems part. There are reasons why we try to put out fires. There are reasons why we fragment our systems, that we sort of work in silos and disciplines. They're powerful reasons. We need to get things done. We need to sort of work with people who understand our language. I think one of the hardest things from a systems perspective is creating opportunities to link the data, to bring different disciplines together and have these conversations. And so I think where it breaks down is when it's just hard to see the big picture, and that's why we really need to bring some tools and some structure to this conversation and create the space to make it happen. Let's fund this type of conversation, this kind of work. And again, not for everything. Sometimes we can work quickly, but when we are really struggling with these persistent problems.
Let me say something about the incredible way that the Dutch were able to get this going. These ideas of their systematic safety approach were first published in 1992, coming out of a road safety research institute. But by 1996, they got a covenant with all different levels of government, national level, provincial level, and the municipalities. Just somehow they got them all to buy into this. A key thing to that was the top level, the national level, saying, we will sweeten the deal with a big subsidy. And so there'll be a subsidy going. Any community that wants to implement speed control stuff will give you 50 cents on the dollar to do that. That sweetened it for us. I would say the main impediment to us is that our standard setting body is the people who set the standards are the people who run the roads. The AASHTO is the Association of State Highway Transportation Officials. They set the standards with their green book and so on like that. And they don't want to set a standard that makes them look bad. They don't want to set a standard that would make them need to all of a sudden spend lots of money that they don't have. They're reluctant to do this. And so the only way I can see it happen, like for instance, we have no standard on how many lanes it's okay for a pedestrian to have to cross. In Europe, they have a standard, 2. In America, is it 4? No. Is it 6? No. No limit. No limit. With no standard on what constitutes a safe crossing at a bus stop. So I see two ways forward. One is action by the federal government to come up to say this is a crisis. Come on, states. Come on, municipalities, and we'll put some money in to sweeten this and bring you to do this. And the other is a legal approach. Somehow the way we fought big tobacco, somehow the way we've fought other things, to make it a civil right for people to have safe mobility.
I think that's all the time we have for questions, but if you want to catch Leah, Kristen, or Peter during the break, I think they'll be around. I don't want to speak for them, but thank you so much for being here. We have a break, and then our keynote presentation will be after that.